Good afternoon, and welcome to the third session of our webinar series, What Will Schools Be Like Next Year? Visioning for the Future of Education, with CEI Executive Director, Dr. Christine Mason, Executive Director of the Michigan Elementary and Middle School Principals Association, Paul Liebenow, and Principal of Upper Providence Elementary School, Dr. Melissa Patchke. My name is Dana Asby, and I will be your webinar manager and host. Today's meeting will last approximately 1 hour. Microphones will be muted during the presentation, but at designated times, for example, during our question and answer session, you can use the raise your hand feature to request an open mic. When speaking, be sure to eliminate all background noise. Thanks to a partnership with C4 Innovations, we are offering 1 hour of continuing education credit. We can also offer you a certificate of participation. For record-keeping purposes, you must identify yourself while on the meeting platform using first and last name or email address you used to register for this event. You can either ensure that your name appears as a part of your video panel or enter it into the chat box. Registration affirms your consent to receive an evaluation follow-up link via email and your consent to recording. If you experience any technical issues, please send a private chat to Ingrid Paget, our technical support manager for today's webinar. We're also offering access to the Childhood Trauma Learning Collaborative Basecamp platform. We offer resources such as curricula, webinars, articles, and other evidence-based resources around topics related to youth mental health and trauma, including visioning, mental health support systems, mindfulness, and equity in education. You'll be invited to join the Basecamp platform. You can either accept or ignore this invitation. We're pleased that you joined the webinar, and I'd now like to introduce our webinar hosts, Dr. Christine Mason, who's the founder and executive director of the Center for Educational Improvement, and she's also the project director of the Childhood Trauma Learning Collaborative and the co-author of Visioning Onward, a guide for all schools, and 2 recent books on mindfulness and trauma. Today, Dr. Mason is joined by her co-authors, Paul Liebenow, the executive director of the Michigan Elementary School Principals Association, who has worked with teams of leaders to come up with a vision for improving education in Michigan by redesigning its programs and offerings to better meet the needs of African American and Latinx principal leaders in urban areas such as Detroit. She's also joined by Dr. Melissa Patchke, principal of Upper Providence Elementary School in Upper Providence, Pennsylvania. Melissa is the Zone 2 representative to the National Association of Elementary School Principals Board of Directors, where she mentors great principals who are always seeking ways to be the catalyst of what's right for their students. Paul, Missy, and Chris will be joined today by 2 guests, entrepreneur and global educator Kevin Simpson, and Yale faculty member and director of the School Mental Health Initiative for the New England MHTTC, Dr. Martha Staheley. I now turn it over to Dr. Mason. Thank you.
So Chris, as soon as you have it working, just cue me and I'll turn it right back over to you. So welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Patchke, I go by Missy, and I am excited for these topics today. This is the third of a 3-part series, and for those of you who have been joining us, you'll know that our focus today is going to be about what's currently happening, how visioning can help you as school leaders or school contributors, and how we can move forward with that. We're also planning to bring to you some examples, both through research and practitioners of exemplars doing the work right now. We plan to provide ideas for you that you can take back to that visioning team that you're starting to create and start to have those critical conversations of direction and leadership. And in addition, we're hoping to help you not only identify the foundation of a mission, but how to have a sustainable action plan that is worthy of a global implementation. So for those of you following in our guide, we're going to be giving you a glance over from steps 5 to 8 in our visioning process. Okay, so one of the pieces, and Paul, feel free to step in at any point, that is highly imperative is that we allow space to open up for possibilities. In saying that, knowing that as we're forming our teams, there's a potential to make a difference and the the potential to truly make effective, sustainable change is oftentimes the momentum that we need to do this very difficult work. So Paul, I'll turn this over to you and to Marcia with the work that you're doing with the heart-centered leadership.
I might be able to lead this exercise since I've done it before, Paul, if that's okay with you.
That would be delightful.
Okay. So we have a heart beaming exercise that we like to do that brings everyone a little sense of calm in these uncertain times. And it's much like the loving kindness meditation that some people might be familiar with, where we start to cultivate a sense of compassion first for ourselves, and then we start to send it out to those in our immediate circle, perhaps friends and families. And then we widen that circle out to our community and eventually the entire world. So we'll start it all together. Just find a comfortable seat and bring both hands to place over the heart. And you can leave your eyes open with a soft gaze towards your nose, or you can close down the eyes and take a deep breath in and out. And on your next inhale, imagine love shining like a light all around you, coming from the top of your head all the way down through your feet. Feel that sense of compassion and kindness for yourself coursing through your body, enveloping you in a protective halo of compassion and love. On your next inhale, fill up with that compassion and love. And on your next exhale, imagine a loved one and send some of that compassion towards them. Picture them in your mind's eye and see that compassion filling them up from head to toe, forming a protective halo around them. As you continue to inhale and exhale, think of more loved ones, sending out compassion from your heart to theirs. Next, imagine other members of your community, some that you know well, some that might just be acquaintances. Picture them in your mind's eye. And on your next exhale, send some love and compassion to them, seeing it surround the group like a protective halo. Now imagine someone you might have some difficulty with, perhaps some conflict. Bring up that sense of love and compassion in yourself. And on your next exhale, send that love and kindness from your heart to theirs. Next, bring an image of all of the people in the world and pull up that protective halo that you have for yourself. Take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, send that love all around the globe, forming a protective halo of compassion and love. Take another breath in and out, and slowly blink open the eyes.
Thank you, Dana. That was really great. I really appreciate that you took that over. I think it's very important for us to all realize that we have such an effect on those around us, and be it the pieces that we have as our personal strengths or those that we're still working on, we complement our neighbors. And this is a key quote that definitely connects all of us together, and no matter what effort or no matter what cause we're working on. So one of the people that's joining us today is Kevin Simpson, who is a global entrepreneur and has an impressive resume that I could never begin to do justice. So Kevin, I'm going to turn this over to you and ask you to introduce yourself, but also give us a flavor of some of the work that you're doing on equity and inclusion for schools.
Thank you, Melissa. And what I decided to do is I wanted to do something that was a little bit different. I wanted to share sort of my work and my story through a free verse as I reflected on some of the people, the situations, the encounters that have transpired over the last 15 years in international education, going from the US to abroad. I want to thank Dr. Mason for inviting me on and be part of today's learning opportunity. Her and I go back 13 years in Washington, D.C. when I was first getting started as a freelancer. I always like to start with, I'm a kid from Flint, Michigan. That's always number one with me. And my story in international education has been quite unique. This year we launched what's called International Educator Equity. And so I want to share with you all a piece that I've been working on. It's called, Oh, Say Can We See? In 2000, I would meet a man who looked like me. He shared that he would journey back to London after the summer. I thought and wondered, who is he? How is that possible? A lunch led to my destiny 5 years later. It was added on my to-do one-day list. Apply, wait, offers, Dubai, Egypt, Laos, 3, all for me. What would I do? Where would I go? Tall, black, flying T, heading to Vientiane to teach overseas, a first for me that I could see. KDSL to KDSL Global, what did I see? Education, the world, but not many who looked like me. Co-conspirators in my midst who believed and shared the world. One country to 25. In the year of Yes, We Can, I would enter a land of opportunity. Wasn't that supposed to be America? I found life and made a plan in the desert. Sir, what do you do? Play basketball? Are you in the military? Is that what you see? Let me help you. What do you not think I do? Where are you from? Ah, I hear it in your voice. That from led to a distinct treatment. I was from a place where blue was respected, others were rejected. Met with, I expected an old white man. You look just like us. Welcome, brother. Who is invited? Who are you? What do you do? Oh, say, can they see? Stop, pause, reflect, body in the shy, mind on the world, the questions, the looks, not the norm. I left Dubai for this. I can't see in this land that was supposed to be for me. A turn down led to a turn up. Don't look the part. White men preferred. How do we get others to see? Speak up, amplify, research, advocate, learn, write, values, vision, mission, misaligned. Silence, silence, silence. Folks are saying they still don't see, or don't want to see. Statements, quotes, emails, phone calls, how are you? Be safe. So now you see, show me your commitments and your policies. Matter, collective petitions, recruitment, validation, change, more. Do you see? The vision started with someone who looked like me. Really, it wasn't about me, but we. Oh, say, can we see?
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Dan, you want to lead the poll question?
Yeah, I'll lead that. So right now, we want everyone to reflect on and think, what has your school or district done to address equity? So there are 5 different responses. We'll give you a moment to read over those and to select.
So Kevin, as you can see, it looks like we have a pretty even split about where people on, at least in this audience, are at in their work at the school district level.
I'd say that's pretty similar to when I talked about it, but no action has been taken, being like sort of majority. I think it's similar to in the spaces that I work in too. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of awareness, building awareness. There's a lot of collaboratives, a lot of sort of meetings that are being held. And so now I think it's been, as of late, especially in the last month, a lot of sort of what do we need to do next? Sort of post statements and stances that are coming out. So people are sort of shifting to that. We've said this, we believe this. What are our next steps? What are our actions? What do we need to actually do And we'll discuss some of that later.
Yeah. That seems similar to my experience on a local level. What you're describing is across all the spectrums by which you work. Paul, are you seeing similar things from your lens?
Yes, indeed, both in Michigan and countrywide, that there is a growing interest in not just awareness, but in groups taking action. Our own association, representing 1,300 school principals and curriculum directors, has identified work in this space as in the top 3 most important work that we do.
Okay. So one of the pieces that we are ensuring happens during this webinar is looking at the last few steps in our visioning process. So we're going to be talking about how to refine the visioning process, how to create a measurement and accountability to it. Also, how we've talked a lot about making sure that we have multiple voices involved. So how do you build consensus towards a unified vision? And then finally, what happens with that action plan? So I'm going to talk a little bit about collective efficacy again. If you were in the first 2 sessions, you understand that this is an important concept to the foundation of our work, because we truly do believe in the power of bringing groups of people together and motivating them to understand the impact that they can have on a system when the wheel is running together and when multiple people have had input and multiple stakeholders. So that's going to be an ongoing theme that you hear, is visioning is not an isolate sport, it's a team effort. So as we progress forward today, you're going to hear some ideas from those that are presenting. You'll also hear some ideas from research and different exemplars. Feel free to grab what you have in front of you, take some notes. Think about, what am I hearing that's different, innovative? What is unique about some of the ideas that are coming across? And then what just interests me that I want to get away from when I get out of this information center? I want to look for more data, more research on, so I can fine-tune my process.
So Missy and everyone, thank you for stepping in. So when we look at our roles in a social change ecosystem, there's many things we can do to help move forward, to look at the future, and to think about what we can do to transform education, or even to move forward from where we are right now with smaller steps towards next fall. We are all right now in a place of experimenting. You can think of multiple experiments you've had this last week, last few months. As you go forward with visioning or into the fall, there will be more experiments. We also know that many of you are right on the front line. You are experiencing the realities day by day of remote learning, of what to do with food distribution, how to find kids who you're having trouble locating, how to make a system work when in fact you haven't had a real systematic plan. So frontline responding is really an important part of anything we do with visioning and looking at the future. Paul, Missy, and I have been working to try to promote the concept of visioning for the future, thinking what we could do if we transformed our educational system into something that had more equity, had more heart to it, and was something that in fact could better prepare people for today and tomorrow. And Kevin, I think you wanted to talk some about the rest of this ecosystem.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So Ms. Deepa Iyer, in coming up with this, and I'm going to give us a little mini a chance to look at it and think through it. There's 3 parts to this. There's a part or a piece to look at this map, to look at the various roles that are in the circles around the middle, the center, and then there's a reflection guide. And this is something that can be done individually. It could be done as part of a team, or it could be done as a part of your entire school or organization. So what I want us to do is look in the middle and look at the 4 words. Excuse me, there's more than 4. There's many, there's probably like 6 words. So I'll read those to you. You have equity, inclusion, liberation, justice, solidarity, resiliency, and interdependence. We want you to pick one of those words. So as you pick one of those words, think about, why did you pick that word? How does that stand out? How does that relate to the work that you have been doing or work that you see yourself doing? Then we want you to look outside of the circles, as Chris was to the weavers, the storytellers, the disruptors, the builders, the visionaries, and think which of those would best describe you right now in the work you're doing, or again, the work you will be doing. And then another question that they sort of pose when you're reflecting on this is to think about where you feel comfortable and natural, which role makes you sort of come alive. And then this entire process, like we said, it's looking at the visuals, it's looking at the middle, and it's also reflecting. It's different questions that you're asking yourself in terms of sort of where you're at on your own journey, knowing that your role might change depending on if you're looking individually, you're looking as part of a team, or you're looking as a part of a whole. So again, this is something that we definitely highly suggest that folks look at the protocol, look at the questions. I believe the link is provided. If not, we can provide that for you all.
So I'd like you to consider for a moment the macro and micro elements of adaptive and transformational leadership. Today, we're experiencing a great deal of drama around the concern from the impact of COVID-19. It's been devastating in many parts of the country, disrupting families, schools, and the community. And so now we have an opportunity to take advantage of the situation to make a choice. We can hunker down and wait for all of this to pass and believe that we're going to return to what we experienced even 9 months ago with no change. Or we can see this pandemic and the racial injustices that we've observed now day in and day out for the past several weeks exposed to the core. And we can see these events as opportunities to make different choices, to choose to take advantage of these situations to reform how we operate, how we care for people, how we get to justice and equity. So think about your job, your current role in your position, wherever you are from coast to coast. In East Lansing, Michigan, we're experiencing racial injustice, lack of equity, many of the things that people experience across the country at different levels. And in our organization, we're talking about the solutions and beginning to take action around those solutions. So we live in a time that calls us to claim responsibility for our lives and the creation of a world in ways never witnessed before. We're at the turning point today. And I trust that all of you online, 114 people are with us. Thank you for joining us, by the way. I'm 63 years old now and nearly 40 years in K-12 education. I've watched over the last 4 decades, many changes, lots of changes, good and bad. But now I see the opportunity for wonderful things to happen in terms of reconciliation and justice. Well, it's back to me again, since we're missing our keynoter. Transgenerational thinking. We need to be thinking about what the next generation will be thinking about, how they will see what's happening right now. I had a conversation with a teacher this morning and also a principal whose 8th grade daughter going into 9th grade said, I'm really concerned if I'm going to make it, if I'm going to survive. If I get COVID-19, will I survive? Will I live? There's a great deal of fear and trepidation across the country around COVID-19. So we need to be thinking about how we can affirm and support this next generation, help them get through this pandemic, and think about what the future should look like. Futures thinking is about getting past the current challenges of the day, because we have lots of them today, and be thinking about what tomorrow, what next week, what 3 years, what 5 years will look like in a best world. And the ultimate aim is to think about what will come after our current situation and plan for it with hope, but also with intentionality, making a plan and identifying strategies that will lead us to the outcome that we so desire. Chris, are you going to join us on?
This is Martha.
Okay, sorry.
So, hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Martha Staley from the Yale Program for Recovery and Community Health in the Yale School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry. And what you see on your screen there is a model of how we can begin to address trauma. And if we think about what Paul just said about taking the long view and the long path, and if you think about what Kevin said about the words that you choose in the middle of that and the different roles that we see people bringing in within our organization, our family, our classroom, the world, what the thread of trauma often can run through our schools and our communities and our families. For many years, we've been, as educators, have been thinking about trauma in various ways, seeing it in our classrooms and schools. And in the last several months, the idea of trauma has risen to the top of what's happening in the news and how people are responding, both to the COVID-19 disruption and pandemic, and also the racial injustice and the discussions around race and equity. So we know from a lot of different types of research that when children are exposed to trauma, when any of us is exposed to trauma, that can heighten our fear and anxiety and depression. That can come out for children, as in all of us, with difficulty regulating our emotions and our behavior, problems with learning, problems concentrating, and in interpersonal relationships. A lot of what I see in my news feed is devoted to this, arguing with your family while you're in the middle of pandemic, how to have difficult conversations when you're talking about equity, people feeling terribly depressed, incredibly anxious. Some of the fears that Paul mentioned about kids in school, what will happen when I go back to school? What if we don't go back to school? All of that. And all of that is happening within an ecosystem. It's happening within an environment. So childhood trauma is not a monolith on its own. It's not just one thing. And it doesn't happen only to children and only between whatever is traumatic and wherever the child is, right? It's happening within a larger context. So that means that, we can go on to the next slide. That means that when we're thinking about addressing childhood trauma, we also have to think systemically. We have to think about sort of a multifocal approach to addressing trauma in children. And so we also have to think a multi-pronged approach about creating the visions for the future and addressing trauma, especially as we're thinking about going back to school, right? Because if you think about the traumas that have happened with children and families and schools in the last several months, they are many, many, many. And it's going to take all of us a long time to learn how to talk about that and address that. What we know from developing a compassionate school mental health model is that all of these things kind of have to happen at once or in cycles, up and down, up and down. Sorry, Dana, you can go back for just a moment, please. We have to reduce the causes of anxiety and trauma at home, in school, and in society. We have to support children. That might mean treatment for them, their families. It might mean therapy, counseling. It might be developing natural supports in the community, churches, community organizations, the places where families and children already are getting support. Because those protective factors need to be strengthened. The nurturing adults around children need to be supported The compassion in environments needs to be enhanced. And we need to think about building resiliency and increasing skills, but also helping children and helping ourselves get our power and agency back, and see a vision for ourselves as overcoming the trauma, which is what brings us back to this idea of visioning, is because we have to hold out for children and ourselves this idea of hope and the continuation of the story, right? The story doesn't end with these traumas. There is a piece after this, and it's what we do with that piece that helps us build resiliency and address those traumas. Chris?
Okay, let me try again. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so good. Okay, so when we look at the mental health model that Dana and Martha and I've written about, and we've got coming out in an upcoming book, that model is the one that Martha just spoke about. It really is related to what we call the 5 C's of heart-centered learning. And that's something that Paul and Missy and I have been working on for about 6 years. With those 5 C's, we have a way of integrating consciousness, compassion, confidence, courage, and community into what's happening in classrooms and in schools, whether they be virtual classrooms or in-person classrooms. They rely upon caring, competent leaders. They rely upon self-care, developing community and homeschool connections, and mental health literacy. Next slide. And I just want to remind everyone that we do have the chat room available, and at 5 o'clock at the end of the formal presentation, we are going to have a panel available for discussion. So if you have questions you want to ask us, feel free to start putting those in our chat line right now, and we'll kind of keep track of them as we go along. Related to the whole concept of heart-centered learning and a compassionate model for addressing children's mental health needs is an instrument that Paul and Missy and I and others, Dana, developed, again, over a period of about 6 years. It was validated with Professor Shlomo Sawalowski, quite a mouthful, from Wayne State University in Detroit, and he was the statistician on the project. So it was independently validated with a sample of over 800 educators. There are 5 different scales. And next slide. I wanted to show you a few sample questions. So SCATE can be completed in 12 to 15 minutes. It's a self-rating scale where teachers or other educators can rate their own perceptions of self, of the school community, school leadership, of student skills. So you have such items as students show empathy for others. There are items related to equity, to leadership, and it's something that, in fact, once you complete it, you can get results back for your school or district, and also a comparison to a national sample. We also give you with this recommendations for the future and how you can work with what we call a core learning team in your school to implement both professional development and also interventions to improve what's going on. There are 2 things that are really unique about SCATE. One of them is that there is some focus on the neurobiology of trauma and what we can do to alleviate that. And the other is not only is it validated, but in fact, we give you recommendations, and recommendations not only for what happens with your team, but how to get professional development, because we believe really that continuous learning cycle is really critical for the future. Okay, next slide.
Chris, with that, I need to reiterate that the SK tool was validated, as you mentioned, with great pains in our partnership with Wayne State University and Dr. Shlomo. And the beauty of this for practitioners, for the school, individual principals and teachers, is that you can pinpoint areas of need. There are a lot of tools and products in the market today, and we've been vetting them for the better part of 4 or 5 years and find that this really floats to the top in terms of a quality tool for identifying needs at both the classroom, but particularly at the school level.
So as we are all managing the COVID, the pandemic, the school closures, those types of things, I saw in the chat that somebody asked, with home supports, if we're not in school, will school districts step up to provide resources to families? And this all comes to that caring, compassion component. I can tell you from where I am and in our school district at schools, one of our focuses is making sure that we are providing as much and as many resources to the homes as possible. But we also have to make sure not only our families and the students, we have to take care of our staff. We have to make sure that we're not overdoing for them, that our expectations are reasonable, and that they know we care about their health and their mental health as well. And here's the tough one for all of us. Many of you on this call or in this webinar are champions of children, and you're out there serving every day. But self-care is so critical to be that competent leader, that vision champion as we move forward. So whatever that means to you, know that it's important that it happens. They need you.
Thank you for that. Just one other point before we jump, but because our Michigan Education Association did a survey, 15,000 teachers responded, and our normal retirement rate's right around 2%, and we're up to close to 10%. That is, qualified, extremely talented teachers are retiring early for fear of the budget cuts and COVID-19 and the impact. So as you're out in the field, I highly recommend that you provide as much support, communicate with as many people as you possibly can. They need a collective hug, if you will, and they need to know it's going to be all right.
I'm gonna hop in real quick too, Paul. I'm glad you said that. One thing that where I now serve in Dallas that I thought was stellar was there was built-in self-care. Before we went to online learning, we had from the counseling team at the school and at the district level, that was built in. That was an upfront thing that our, looking at where we were at in health-wise and weekly check-ins. And I have colleagues where that did not occur at all, as we were talking across different places around the states and even abroad.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we have challenges now providing service to many of our most needy students, our special needs students. And we have to be thinking seriously, collectively about prioritizing how we manage the challenges in terms of providing service. We need to ensure equity in fiscal policies. We need to make sure that policies both at the Department of Education level and in the legislature are focused on meeting students' needs, because the COVID challenge is going to be extended likely, and we're going to see probably a blended model. Some students will be coming back, and probably 20 to 25% of students across the country will be doing distance learning. And the impact on our special needs students is pretty traumatic. We need to make sure that we're meeting their basic needs: food and shelter, healthcare, school meals. Need to continue through the summer and fall. Many districts throughout the country are doing that daily, providing a pickup point and or delivering to homes. We need to provide access to mental health supports through the summer and fall. We need to coordinate and address students' growing academic and social emotional needs with additional screening. That's where SK can come in terms of getting a sense of how the school needs to move forward. Map the local resources for parents and help them integrate the resources. Help parents find the answers and help put the map together for them to provide that support. The gap continues to grow. So it's our responsibility to mitigate that gap growth, right? We have to step in and make sure that the resources are provided, because often in different parts of the country where I'm working now more remotely, I'm finding that the gap grows because we're not providing resources for our special needs kids. Is it difficult? Yeah, try providing occupational therapy remotely. There's a challenge as an example. So this summer, We need to continue learning. We built a continuity of learning document to provide support for families so they can keep their children, their students engaged. We need to keep health and phys ed primary. We don't want to grow couch potatoes over the summer. We created a health and physical education guidance document, which we're about to launch in 5 days. And then we put together work groups, rural, urban, suburban, to identify how we're going to come back to school in August, September. We're making a plan, and it includes our special needs students and giving them high priority. Missy?
So
Paul,
yeah, go
can
ahead.
you hear me?
Yes, please.
Good. So I just want us to think very briefly about the summer. There are a variety of things happening around the country as we prepare for the summer. In New York, there's some consideration of in-person special ed classes. Sometimes some of the schools are thinking about after-school programs and how to use those, or actually even what to do for summer camps. So I don't know what your school districts are doing, but think about that. And part of preparing for the fall is looking at what's happening right now and during the summer.
So thanks for bringing that back, Chris, because across the country, day camps are opening and some week-long camps are reopening. Surprisingly, maybe, but the after-school programs are continuing to open in the Midwest with both a blended model where students are simply connecting via Wi-Fi, and some are coming together following the CDC guidelines, but actually meeting together. And they're finding that that's what the students love the most, getting together, high touch, interaction, conversation.
Okay, so you're getting the third of our webinars right now. Next week, we also have a national webinar that will combine what we've been talking about in the 3 webinars that have been part of this series. So if you missed the first 2, next week is your chance to catch up. Also, we will be having some new information. We keep updating our information week by week as we learn more about what's going on and what others are recommending.
So this is a picture of my primary school, Upper Providence Elementary. Next slide. But here's the meat of that school. We've talked about collective efficacy. We're about to talk about visioning. I'm going to share with you the visioning that has happened over 18 years with this amazing group of educators. This school is an engaging environment where everyone is acknowledged, values, and matters. We support the whole child and the team sport of teaching and learning. We care, we laugh, we collectively believe in the life-changing power of our school community. Those are not my words. Those are the words and the beliefs in the heart of every person on these slides. Next slide. I had the opportunity to be a principal at a school that was changing and needed to truly transform. And at that time, I was working with a head teacher who, fast forward, is now the principal, and I'm back to one school in my world. But change the next slide. So Spring City, this is the heart and soul of that small school that I had the opportunity to work to start a vision and start a transformation. And here's where it ended, and they're still working on a year ago. They needed to have the foundation of what do we want from our students, what do we want for children to believe, and then we go from there. And this is how simple it was at the time. Be safe, be respectful, be responsible, but always be awesome. And you can see the work that was done in just 1 year with this group of individuals was transformative, because they went from a group that had very little leadership to a combined group that believed they made a difference for kids. Next slide. The most important piece I want you to take away is these are pictures that happened in the last few months, like 3 or 4 weeks after the COVID closure. That first and original group, the ones that basically their vision is life changing. They believe they have the power to change lives and to affect a whole school community. Even though we were in shutdown, they came up with 101 ways to reach out and make a difference for kids. And it was absolutely unbelievable. And it was nothing I did as their school leader except for keep the course and help them, guide them through a very difficult time. And they took the lead and went. It was absolutely impressive. So that's where we're going to be talking about vision and how to create a sustainable model.
So here are some reminders as you think about your vision statement and developing one. Recommendations are to make it present tense, make it vivid, inspirational, and evoke emotion. We looked at vision statements from companies such as Starbucks and Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and we looked at what they did with their vision statements. And these are 4 factors that are pretty consistent. So if you have a vision statement right now for your school, you might compare it to these 4 features. If you're developing one, think about them. Next slide. So we have a sample vision statement that we developed based on everything we've been saying for about the last 6 years and also the last 6 weeks. Okay? You'll have a copy of this, but think about these words: foundational support. And we know right now we're paying more attention to families. So for families and children, we're embedding compassion, self-care, equity, and justice. We know that everyone is undergoing a huge amount of stress and trauma. So we want to do what we can, whether it's virtually or in schools, to help alleviate that trauma. As we promote both academic learning and also cognition, thinking about the neuroscience, okay? Thinking about executive functioning. So we want to promote all of that.
Safety.
Paul or Kevin, do you have something you want to add here?
Safety is foremost, as you see in this mission statement, and it is the most important thing to staff and families and many students, quite frankly. And so we need to include that consideration and be very sensitive to that as we vision forward, think about what we want the school to look like 3 to 5 years from today.
So the shorthand of saying this is through connecting. We know connections are important. Compassion, self-care, student metacognition, meaning students are taking more responsibility for their learning. And we're helping them think about and consider how they learn. We're fostering communities that reduce trauma and enhance learning, equity, well-being, and resiliency. And if you notice, these are very consistent with our model for a compassionate approach to school mental health.
The beauty of this vision reduced, this smaller version, is that it's memorable. That is, it's difficult to remember or memorize a lengthy vision statement. So it would be helpful to write a sub-vision that's both memorable and does evoke emotion that will help us or help your constituents remember.
So we'll quickly do the next poll. Have you refined your vision statement? Okay, about an even split. So I think what we're saying will have relevance to you no matter where you are in the visioning process. Glad to see, even if you haven't done that, you're thinking about it, and you may do it soon. So here are some criteria for a mission statement. In our book, we talk about proceeding from mission to vision, or from vision to mission, excuse me. These are the things we want you to remember. The mission should be short, concise, and to the point. Meaningful to all stakeholders. Realistic and measurable. And we'll give you an example. Next slide. This is from a very progressive school in Asheville, North Carolina. Renee Owens was highlighted in our book on visioning. And they developed this statement years ago. And they've kind of updated it as the years go by. But essentially it says, we develop accomplished, confident, and creative learners who are prepared to be compassionate leaders in building a socially just, spiritually connected, and environmentally sustainable world. Think about the emotions this may evoke, okay? And how you really could measure many of these features.
Now, as through the planning process, you're going to be working with that group of your collective visionaries, and you're going to set goals. You're going to figure out how to have them accountable, how to measure them, and you're going to build consensus and belief that these are going to be powerful to move your vision forward. Then it's time to plan it and actually make the action plan. But as with everything else, it won't always go perfectly. There will be some things that step into your way. Paul?
So the challenge is that you have developed your vision and mission, you're very excited about it, and you're ready to roll. Then there's that one person, maybe two, that is in your group that's been quiet the entire time. But just about the time you're ready to launch, they want to opine and bring negativity. So take a deep breath. You'll get past that. And also remember that life interferes. It just gets in the way. And other roadblocks include, price increases, budgets are cut. We're facing that now. School districts across the country are seeing budget cuts as much as 20% of their total budget. Districts or schools are confronted with competing agendas. It may be academic, it may be athletics. There are always competing agendas. Leadership changes, often that challenges a vision being moved forward, a new superintendent, a new principal, new PTA leader. And then new priorities arise and take precedent and try to push your vision off the table, moving it into second place in terms of prioritization. So remember that you're going to have pushback, but you need to be ready to pivot and keep going forward a little at a time, taking care of the day-to-day, but keeping the vision for your school or your organization at the forefront of all that you do. Don't shelve your vision statement. Keep it in front of you and in front of your staff, your parents, and your leadership. Some ways to infuse this into the school culture are by making your vision statement visible via media, Twitter, Facebook, your school website. Provide professional development around the topics that you're trying to reform or improve. Conduct a special event, include the local newspaper or television. Make it an event, make it an exciting event. Monitor the progress and problem solving along the way. You need to be able to pivot. If you hit a roadblock along the way, make a change as needed. Don't give up, make the change and move forward. And leverage every resource that you can manage. Bring in the community, bring in parent groups, but leverage all of your resources to push forward.
And just to add on to what Paul has said, I think also it's when we think about vision, it's asking those questions, making sure that it's accessible to everybody. It's making sure when we look at our social media and our website that it actually stands out, it pops out. It's when you have new staff, making them aware. One of the best interview questions I was ever asked was my thoughts when I was presented with the school's vision statement, and then what that would look like in action in the classroom. And the school district now where I'm serving in Texas, that was one of the things. The vision was really one of the pieces that brought me to want to work with them. It talked about engaging in the global marketplace. And a lot of the work I did has been all around the world. And so on the classroom level, that looked like, especially when we moved into online learning, was engaging our scholars with global leaders from Nigeria to Singapore and around the world. So making sure that was embedded.
So once you have this established, then you have to maintain the momentum. And you need to do this by keeping this vision relevant, making sure that those that it is serving understand that it's a long-term game, not a short-term gig. Making sure that the community remains engaged with the vision, I love what Kevin just said about being asked as a new potential employee, how would this vision, how would we see this in your classroom? Because that leadership is ensuring that that teacher new to their system understands their priorities and beliefs, but also not only being the champion of that cause, but being the rock to make sure it's consistently, as Paul said, put in front of whatever is happening there, as we've all just experienced with the pandemic and our shutdowns. That doesn't, it might change how we're operating, but it doesn't change our belief system. And that's what we have to move forward.
My experience as both a principal and nearly a decade as superintendent led me to understand the best way to get something moving forward was to let it be someone else's idea, particularly a school board member or a staff member. Let it be their idea. Let them move it forward as the champion of that concept or idea, and then bring leaders around you that are skilled, ambitious, motivated, and enthusiastic. And let them be the rock alongside of you. You need to be the guide on the side, and then it will flourish.
I'm going to move us ahead a little more quickly because I'm looking at the time. So just realize we're aware that there are global trends that will impact your visioning process. We're going to try to wrap up in the next 3 to 4 minutes. So Kevin, a few questions for you. And as you think about visioning and you think about questions of others, what do you think people should be talking about? What questions should they ask themselves?
Definitely. I think it's that constant having that communication, that that self-talk as well as that talk with your team, and looking at things like, is it worth going for? A lot of times, we're here in vision statements, all children. What does that mean? Is that inclusive of all children? How are we making sure that we're ensuring that resources are available to all children, to all families? So again, that those statements move beyond words and into actions. And knowing, like Missy was saying, it's, being champions of children, champions of teachers. I think, in our work, these are definitely questions that we look at. We look at why it would succeed, why it might fail. What do I have to lose? What happens if I don't do it? Am I the one to do it? Especially that third question. And like Paul was saying, a lot of having others step up when you notice. So right now we have people in the international education space who are stepping up, who are writing petitions, who are calling for a look at practices in the entire international education ecosystem around taking an anti-racist stance, around looking at things that are comments that are being made from alumni and different experiences from families and from scholars, and taking that into effect as they think about vision, they think about policies, systems, and practices, and protocols and procedures, or a lot of those things. And again, looking at number 4 is what impact change will have. And thinking ahead, thinking of the future, and thinking of, always coming back to who do we want, our scholars to be? What's the big picture of where we see them in the future, and making sure, I think a big piece is making sure we have their voices. We've been running talks with families and with scholars. We did one in the US and with some folks in DC, North Carolina, and Texas, asking them the reimagine question. What do they think education should look like when we return? Getting their voices, because there's a lot of that talk going on. You see a lot of ed tech companies and others, but making sure that we're listening to families, we're listening to scholars and their voices, and what do they think schools should look like? So we're not reinventing something without them. They should have as much voice as anyone else, and what they think it will take to restart school.
I just want to point out that we have 2 companion books on trauma and mindfulness, and we will give you this one example, and it has to do with mirrors and thinking about those around you, those around your students. Who are their mirrors, and how does that impact their self-esteem, their confidence, their sense about who they will be as well as who they are? And anyway, our books are full of examples of things that you might be able to take right back to your classrooms in your schools and use. So next slide. So we end with two examples of other vision statements. Ivan Sellers ended our book on visioning with a suggestion that mindfulness needs to expand beyond what we teach ourselves as individuals or what we teach students to do as a private practice into something that's more a community practice. So we have mindful communities, mindful businesses, corporations. He believes that will lead to a more holistic and humanistic paradigm, not only for education, but for the world. And then Martha, if you could speak to the next one.
So here is a sample vision statement on the future of education for 2030. Education has a vital role to play in developing the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that enable people to contribute to and benefit from an inclusive and sustainable future. In focusing on the values of curiosity, imagination, resilience, and self-regulation. And also a core piece about caring about the well-being of friends and families, communities, and the planet. And again, those are the core values of this vision statement, the things that you can return to again and again within the school environment and amongst your learning community. And in fact, they focus on developing as a whole person to help people fulfill their potential, help shape a shared future built on the well-being of individuals, communities, and planets. Again, it's easy to remember. It is concrete and actionable. It's something that can be applied to all of the members of your school community and can be shared freely and is applicable to all of the values that are stated above.
So we have so enjoyed sharing with you these past 3 sessions. We look forward to next week, one more chance to talk about visioning. Here are our books. But as we end and as we think about transitioning to a panel discussion with you, I'd just like to give Kevin perhaps one chance to start talking about what do we do? You know, having a vision is one thing, right? It's wonderful, but we don't want to end with talk. You know, we've all heard a lot of talk. So how do we go then from the vision to action? What recommendations do you have?
That's a great question. I think, Dr. Mason, that's where we are, and that's where our work currently is with the Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color. We saw and heard for so long discussions and groups and collectives and collaboratives, but not a lot in terms of sort of that next step. So we saw the build awareness, equip folks, but then not that action was what was lagging. So I think for us, it is partnering with others, partnering, obviously with families, looking at alumni in that specific international education space, partnering with groups, not operating in silos. It's looking at once you get to that place where folks are ready. It's looking at curriculum. It's looking at policies, looking at handbooks. Looking at those statements, vision statements, mission statements, values, to really see sort of where are they, and are they current? Are they aligned to where we need to head? It's things such as building further capacity when we don't know something, saying you don't know something, and looking for outsiders that you can partner with and collaborate with that could further your learning. It is, it's investment. It's making that investment, that time and that space and that place can have these courageous conversations that need to happen in a lot of places, where you can dissect and unpack different statements. You can unpack sort of what goes on in school and why it goes on, and really, ask those big questions. It's accountability. It goes, I think Paul was saying about monitoring and waiting. One of my favorite ones is inspect what you expect. So not just saying it, but bringing it back obviously to the vision and the why of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So those are some of the things that we see and we've seen, and like was sort of indirectly embedded within the OSACAN, we see even within 2 weeks, a lot of shifts in terms of in the international education space. This went from petitions that people are putting out to being signed to people's voices now coming out and stating their experiences around schooling and around interactions, where it was sort of silent for a while. People in groups would put forth that, we want to see change. And it really has, when orgs put out statements of what they believe, and when they were rooted in people's humanities, orgs, now people are going to hold you accountable. So if you say certain statements, then we're going to come back to that. And so we've seen accreditations are now shifting and having conversations about what we need to do around statements and holding schools accountable. We're seeing recruitment companies that are now speaking up and saying we need to shift our practices. And again, anyone who's reached out to me, I had a lot of folks reach out to me in the last 2 weeks. It has come back to policy. People saying we want to stand with you. We believe the work that you all are doing, and our work is rooted in advocacy, is rooted in learning and research for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who work in the international education space. So people who come to us, I've had a lot of emails, people who want phone calls saying we stand in solidarity. That's great, but we want to see policies, and we want to see actions and what's going to actually change. So that's sort of where we are, shifting, because those are things that we've been talking, and we've been sort of making that noise and sort of chipping away with.
So Paul, Missy, and I want to thank both Kevin and Martha for joining us today. We want to thank all the participants. We have a school leaders guide that you'll be getting, along with follow-up slides, an opportunity to get your CEUs, etc. And Dana, you probably have a couple slides that will help people wind this up, right?
Yes, I do. So first, we just want to thank you for coming to the webinar and remind you that our funding comes from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which does require us to evaluate our services. So attendees that provide their email address will receive an evaluation survey 24 hours after the close of this event, along with today's slide presentation and a link to the archive. The follow-up email will also include a link to request CEU credits and/or a participation certificate. We really appreciate your honest and anonymous feedback, which helps provide information to SAMHSA and assist us in planning future meetings and programs. We also hope that you would make plans to join the Childhood Trauma Learning Collaborative and come to a few of our events, including tomorrow at 4 p.m., a trauma-informed yoga in schools webinar with me. And on the 22nd, as Dr. Mason mentioned, there's a national visioning discussion talking about what school will look like when we go back to school and how to support student and staff mental health. Thank you so much for attending, and for any more information, please contact the Center for Educational Improvement at info@edimprovement.org, and stay posted to our website, www.edimprovement.org, for links to the video presentation. Thank you so much.